My parents spent my surgery funds on a Christmas car for my sister, calling it an investment, then dumped me at my aunt's door saying, "He's a burden, keep him." Years later, I walked back into their house with legal documents, ending their control forever. Hey Reddit, my parents made it clear I wasn't the child they cared about, so I left and built my own life. Thought that was the end of it. Turns out it wasn't. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Christopher. I'm in my late 20s now, working in automation engineering, living with my aunt and uncle. People usually assume there was one dramatic moment that broke us. There wasn't. It was a slow kind of neglect that never looked like a crisis until you were the kid living inside it. I figured out early that I wasn't really part of their idea of family. I was more like something they managed, not someone they cared about. My low blood pressure episodes started when I was around 6. One second I'd be standing fine. The next my vision would fuzz, my legs would feel hollow, and I'd have to grab something before dropping. Teachers reacted fast. Kids stared. The school nurse knew me by name within the first month. It wasn't painful, just embarrassing and unpredictable. Doctors explained everything pretty calmly. They said I needed consistent meals, good sleep, steady routines, and to avoid getting too exhausted. They were clear that it wasn't deadly, just something that needed attention. Weston latched onto the not deadly part and stopped listening. Victoria nodded politely, but I could see her eyes wandering like she had better things to think about. From that point on, I wasn't treated like a kid with a health issue. I was treated like a small, recurring inconvenience. My sister Riley was 2 years younger. Even as a toddler, she drew all the attention. She had energy, speed, confidence, everything Weston loved. He'd talk to anyone who listened about her potential. He never said that word about me. Victoria, on the other hand, focused on image. She wanted the neighbors to think our home was perfect. Perfect kids, perfect behavior, perfect holidays. Especially holidays. Christmas decorations went up earlier every year, but even back then, I understood they weren't for family warmth. They were props. Something she could point at and say, "Look how well we're doing." Daily life shifted gradually. It wasn't an overnight thing. Riley got larger portions because she burns more energy. She got the better snacks because she needs fuel for sports. I got whatever was left. Sometimes it was enough, sometimes it wasn't. No one asked how I felt about it. Victoria told me once, "You don't need heavy food. You're not running around." Weston said something similar, calling it smart resource use. I didn't understand what he meant until I was older and heard him calling Riley the investment. He said it casually one afternoon while Riley was showing off some new basketball trick. "She's the one that's going to get us places," he told a neighbor. "Chris is different." He didn't say it unkindly. He just said it like a fact. From then on, I wasn't allowed to join any activities. Even simple stuff like school clubs. "You'll faint and cause trouble," Weston said. Victoria added that she couldn't deal with episodes in public. It wasn't concern, just annoyance. I watched other kids do normal things while I was kept on the sidelines. Teachers treated me like I'd break if I tried too hard. They meant well. My parents didn't. Speaking up never helped. If I mentioned being hungry, Weston would say I was being dramatic. If I said something felt unfair, Victoria would tell me not to start arguments. Riley wasn't cruel about any of it. She was just a kid who didn't understand the imbalance. She'd get excited about Christmas gifts or new gear and show them to me, and I'd pretend not to care. I learned that reacting to anything risked setting them off. Silence kept things stable. By the time I hit 12, I understood the house better than most adults understood their workplaces. I knew when Weston was in a mood and I should stay unseen. I knew when Victoria was preparing to talk to neighbors and needed Riley nearby to perform as her golden child. I knew that if I had an episode during one of Victoria's presentation days, she'd look at me with a face people usually reserve for bugs on the floor. Riley got enthusiasm, plans, praise, future talk. I got quiet reminders not to cause trouble. She was part of the picture they presented to the world. I was the part they kept off camera. There wasn't one explosion. There was just a steady pattern that never stopped. And by the end of that year, I had accepted something most kids never have to think about. In that house, I wasn't someone they built a life around. I was just someone who needed to stay out of the way. I was 13 when things finally became undeniable. Riley had a big basketball showcase that Saturday morning, something Weston had hyped up like it was some elite event. He kept saying, "This is where it starts, Riley. Big eyes on you today." She was 11, but he talked to her like she was already a drafted athlete. I woke up feeling off. My legs were shaky, and my head felt disconnected from the rest of me. I walked into the kitchen and said quietly, "I don't feel good." Victoria didn't even look up from packing Riley's bag. Just rest. Don't make today difficult. I really don't feel good, I said again, a little louder. Weston shot me a quick glare. We're not doing this right now, Chris. Lie down and don't cause a scene. Riley glanced at me, confused. Are you okay? She asked. I'll be fine, I lied, because Weston hated anything that slowed down his schedule. They walked out a minute later. Weston's last words were, lock the door and don't call us unless the house is on fire. Then the door closed, and the house went silent. My dizziness got worse fast. I tried eating something, but my stomach flipped. Every step felt unsteady. I sat on the couch and tried taking deep breaths, but the room tilted anyway. I leaned forward, elbows to knees, hoping it would pass like it sometimes did. Instead, my arms weakened and slipped. I hit the floor hard. I tried calling Victoria. It rang a few times, then voicemail. I texted her. I feel really bad. No reply. My fingers were numb as I swiped to call emergency services. My voice came out thin when the operator answered. I think I'm fainting. I'm alone. She kept me talking, but everything was fading. Stay where you are. Help is on the way, she said. Her voice felt miles away. Next thing I knew, I woke up staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. The hospital lights were dim, and a monitor beeped steadily beside me. A nurse walked in with a small smile. Good. You're awake, she said. You passed out pretty badly. Are my parents here? I asked. She checked the chart. They said they'll come by later. She said it casually, like this wasn't surprising at all. That hit harder than the fall. She asked what I'd eaten that day. When I admitted I hadn't eaten anything yet, she paused slightly. That doesn't help your condition. Make sure your guardians know. Right. Guardians. A social worker came by to ask why a 13-year-old was brought in alone, and why no one had shown up. The day stretched on. Nurses came and went. They offered soup, checked vitals, adjusted pillows. But there were no familiar voices. No Weston pacing angrily. No Victoria pretending to care. No Riley peeking around the curtain. Not even a text. Night came. I watched shadows shift across the room. Around 8, my phone buzzed with a message. We're still out. Rest. We'll see you tomorrow. That was it. They didn't even ask what happened. The next morning, Weston and Victoria finally walked in. Weston looked irritated, not worried. Victoria looked embarrassed to be seen in a hospital room with me. Riley held a medal. I won second place, she said quietly. Weston pointed at her medal like it mattered more than the IV in my arm. Your sister did well. Try not to cause trouble on important days. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say. The nurse entered to update them. He fainted from low blood pressure and lack of food. He needs consistent nutrition. Victoria gave a tight smile. Of course. There must have been some confusion. When the nurse stepped out, Weston muttered, "This is why people get the wrong idea." And people definitely did. Sirens on our quiet street got everyone talking. Mrs. Grant asked Victoria what happened. Victoria replied sharply, "He just overreacted again." Weston added, "Kids faint sometimes. People love to exaggerate." But the neighbors didn't buy it. I know because they later told Adeline. At home, Weston announced, "You're spending more time at your aunt's. We can't have more misunderstandings." Victoria added, "It'll be easier for everyone." Neither mentioned my health. Neither apologized for leaving me alone. Neither asked how I felt. When Adeline picked me up, she said softly, "We were worried." Jonathan carried my bag without asking anything. The first few weeks after the hospital visit, Adeline asked if I wanted second helpings. Jonathan reminded me to drink water. They didn't make comments about how much I ate or compare me to Riley. They didn't analyze my symptoms or act annoyed when I looked tired. They simply treated it as part of the day. One evening at dinner, Jonathan said, "You're pale. Sit for a bit." No irritation, no judgment. He'd bring a chair closer, pass food without making it sound like charity, and ask about school. The conversations were simple but real. They weren't trying to show off or manage appearances. They were just living. It didn't take long to notice that my episodes became less frequent. Proper meals, consistent sleep, and the lack of tension helped more than any medication had. I still had moments where my vision blurred or my legs felt weak, but they were farther apart. Adeline would say, "Eat first, worry second," and slide a plate toward me. Jonathan would tell me to track what made things worse. It wasn't medical advice, it was just structure, something Weston never provided. Jonathan worked in design and spent a lot of time at a desk, but he approached everything like a project. One day he found me on the couch staring at the ceiling and said, "Come here, let me show you something." He opened a small wooden box filled with old puzzle games and strategy cards. "This helps your brain focus," he explained. "Good practice for life. Strategy first, reaction second." We spent hours solving them. At first, I was clumsy and slow, but Jonathan never rushed me. He'd say things like, think ahead, don't just react, or patterns repeat if you look long enough. It became our routine, and I didn't realize it then, but that structure laid the foundation for almost everything I'd become later. At school, teachers noticed I missed fewer classes. Some of them assumed it was because my health had improved. They didn't know the real reason. I wasn't living in a house that drained me. When I did go home on the occasional weekday, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Weston had this habit of sighing dramatically when I walked into a room. Victoria would ask Riley about her day before even glancing at me. Riley was growing older, busier, and more wrapped in the spotlight Weston built for her. She barely had time to notice anything else. When Riley started joining more travel leagues, Weston became even more obsessed with her schedule. He'd brag to neighbors, coaches, even delivery drivers. She's dedicated, she has a future. And if I walked by during those conversations, he didn't stop bragging. He simply talked louder, like he wanted to drown out my existence. He also started saying things like, Chris is practically not living here anymore, as if it were a point of pride. Victoria always nodded, relieved to have fewer complications. They said it within earshot sometimes. They didn't try to hide it. During one weekend drop-off, Weston stood in Adeline's doorway and said, he does better here anyway. Not with kindness, just resignation. Adeline didn't respond to him, but she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder when he left, as if to make up for the tone he used. The transition to staying there full-time happened slowly but clearly. First it was weekends, then school nights, then entire weeks. Adeline began setting aside a drawer for my clothes. Jonathan bought a small desk and said, do your work here. There wasn't a formal conversation about it. They just made space for me, and I learned to move within it. By the time I was 17, their house felt more like home than my actual one. Victoria still invited me occasionally for holidays or photos, mostly when she needed to look like a mother on social media. Weston didn't argue. He just wanted to focus on Riley's games and her growing attention. The final shift came unexpectedly. Weston arrived one afternoon with my bags already packed in the trunk. He didn't warn me. He just parked in front of Adeline's house, carried everything to the porch, and set it down. I'm busy with Riley's schedule, he said. It's better this way. Less confusion. No discussion. No plan. No emotion. Just a decision. Adeline stepped outside, stunned. Weston, you can't just... But he cut her off. He practically lives here. Might as well make it official. Then he turned, got back into his car, and drove off. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear. There was no shouting match. No door-slamming fight. Weston didn't need drama. He dropped my life on a porch, drove away, and made the message official. Riley was the child he was raising, and I was the child he was placing somewhere else. In that moment, with my belongings sitting on the porch of the only stable home I'd ever known, I understood the truth clearly. I hadn't been pushed out. I'd been replaced. Because I was still a minor, Adeline filed for guardianship. Weston and Victoria signed without a fight. By then, they weren't trying to get me back. They were trying to make me someone else's problem. Turning 18 should have felt like a step into adulthood, but that winter made it clear I'd been on my own long before then. My health had been mostly stable at Adeline and Jonathan's house, but the fainting episodes still came and went. By early December, they became frequent enough that Adeline insisted I see a specialist again. The doctor reviewed years of charts and recommended an operation. Nothing experimental, nothing extreme, but necessary. Delaying this increases the risk of further drops, he explained. If possible, it should be scheduled soon. Adeline nodded immediately. She asked questions. She took notes. She was prepared to adjust everything to make it work. Weston and Victoria, however, reacted like someone had asked them to donate a kidney. When Adeline called them, Weston's first response was, right now, absolutely not. Worst timing imaginable. He didn't ask about risks or urgency. He only asked about cost. Victoria added, it's the holidays. We can't deal with medical bills during Christmas. It would ruin everything. Ruin everything. That phrase stuck with me, even though I should have been used to that tone from her. Jonathan pulled me aside afterward and asked how I felt. I told him I was tired but not surprised. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. He just said, we'll figure something out. December rolled in fast. Adeline went all out decorating the house. She wasn't trying to distract me. Christmas had always been her favorite season, but I could tell she was hoping the lights and warmth would help my mood. She hung a wreath on the door, strung lights along the stairs, and set up a small tree on the kitchen counter. Jonathan joked, she competes with herself every year. Their house felt like a place where the holiday actually meant something. My parents' house was different. Christmas for them was presentation, not celebration. A week before Christmas Eve, Weston invited us over. He didn't mention the surgery at all. He simply said, "Riley wants everyone there for her surprise." That was his way of pretending we were a cohesive family. When we arrived, the driveway caught my attention first. A shiny white car sat parked neatly with a massive red bow on top. It looked like something out of an advertisement. Polished, perfect, expensive. Riley stood beside it, bouncing on her feet, unable to hide her excitement. She shouted, "Do you like it?" before anyone could respond. Victoria stepped out holding her phone, already taking photos. "First car! Christmas gift for our rising star," she said loudly, angling Riley toward the camera. Weston stood proudly behind them, chest puffed out like he had accomplished something heroic. Adeline whispered, "They didn't," but I could already tell they had. Weston waved me over. "Take a look, Chris. Worth every cent," he said. "A long-term investment." I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at the bow, the shine, the sheer price tag of it all. My operation cost less than that car. The timing wasn't an accident. I asked quietly, "So the surgery is?" Weston didn't hesitate. "We're not paying for that right now." Then he added, "This car makes more sense long-term than hospital nonsense." Victoria chimed in without looking at me. "Don't turn this into a scene. It's Christmas." Jonathan took a step forward, but Adeline held up a hand, stopping him. She walked toward Weston, her voice steady. "You denied a medical procedure your son needs so you could buy a car?" Weston scoffed. "He's exaggerating the urgency." Victoria nodded. "Doctors always make things sound dramatic. And honestly, Christopher is old enough to handle things without making everyone else miserable." Adeline didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This isn't about drama. This is about responsibility." Weston shot back, "Don't lecture me. Riley earns what she gets." Victoria added, "We can't keep dropping money on Christopher every time he feels faint." I felt Jonathan tense beside me. He muttered under his breath, "Their priorities are clear." Riley, to her credit, looked torn. She said softly, "Chris, I didn't know." She meant it, but she didn't understand the full picture. None of this was her fault, but she was part of the justification. Adeline finally said, "Enough. Chris is staying with us permanently. We're not asking for your approval." Weston shrugged like he couldn't care less. "He practically lives there anyway." Victoria crossed her arms. "Honestly, it'll make things easier. He's always stressing the house out." There was no remorse, no hesitation. They were ready to lose a son if it meant protecting their comfort. Adeline turned to me and said quietly, "We can move forward with adoption, if that's what you want." I looked at the Christmas lights wrapped around the porch rails. The cold air made everything sharper. "Yes," I said. "I want that." It wasn't a scene. It was a decision. As we walked back to the car, Adeline's old, scratched one, I glanced once more at Riley's new vehicle. The giant bow fluttered in the wind like a flag planted in the middle of the truth. That night, Adeline and Jonathan started the paperwork at the kitchen table, and I stopped thinking of Weston and Victoria as something I needed to fix. I turned 18 before everything was finalized, but Adeline and Jonathan didn't stop just because the calendar changed. We finished the process anyway. When the adoption finalized the year I turned 19, it was almost anticlimactic. Weston and Victoria signed the papers like they were clearing a bill. No objections, no questions, no emotional display. Adeline hugged me tightly afterward and said, "Now we can actually plan your future." Jonathan added, "Clean slate. Start fresh." I believed him. The surgery happened a month later. It wasn't complicated, but it corrected the underlying problem the doctors had been watching for years. The thing that kept my blood pressure crashing out of nowhere. Jonathan stayed with me through the procedure, and Adeline handled every detail once I was discharged. For the first time, recovery felt peaceful instead of stressful. No guilt, no tension, just rest. I spent those recovery weeks sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, doing basic things to pass time, browsing forums, watching tutorials, reading random guides about tech. Jonathan saw what I was watching one afternoon and asked, "Ever think about learning to automate stuff? It's basically puzzle solving with code." He knew I liked structure, logic, and anything that had rules. It wasn't a suggestion. It was more like he recognized the way I already thought. I didn't know anything about programming then, so I started with the basics. Simple Python courses, small exercises, printing text to the screen. It clicked fast. Coding had the same appeal strategy games once did. Clear input, clear output. No emotional manipulation, no guessing how someone would react. Just instructions and results. Jonathan encouraged me. Stick to a schedule, he said. Small practice every day beats random bursts. So I set one. Morning reading, afternoon coding challenges, evening practice scripts. It became routine. By 20, I had moved past beginner projects and started automating little tasks around Adeline and Jonathan's house, organizing files, tracking expenses, scheduling reminders. It wasn't impressive, but it felt productive. Adeline said, "This is helping more than you know," and she meant it. Being useful felt good. One day, Jonathan showed me a problem he had at work. He needed to extract data from hundreds of invoices manually. It took hours. I asked if I could try something. I wrote a crude script that read the files and pulled out the fields automatically. It wasn't perfect, but it saved him a few hours. Jonathan watched the program run and said, "Chris, this is real value." That was the moment I realized automation wasn't just a hobby. It was a path. I started applying for internships and junior tech roles. Most ignored me. A few companies rejected me outright because I had no degree. But one small software company brought me in for an interview because they liked the automation examples I sent. They hired me as an assistant developer. It was nothing glamorous. Maintenance tasks, documentation, testing modules, but I got access to mentors, and I learned fast. My lead developer, Marcus, once told me, "You think like an engineer already. You just need experience." So I absorbed everything. A PIS, workflow logic, data structures, automation frameworks. It felt like discovering a language I was meant to speak all along. By 21, I built my first major internal tool for the company. It automated a multi-step workflow employees used daily. Something that took 10 minutes now took 30 seconds. Management noticed. Marcus told me, "You saved us dozens of hours a week with that." That acknowledgement meant more than any grade or compliment I'd gotten growing up. Meanwhile, Weston and Victoria suddenly began resurfacing. Through others, not to me. A neighbor told Adeline, "Your brother said Christopher works in tech now. He always knew you'd be brilliant." Another person said Victoria was bragging about how she supported your computer interest when you were young. They hadn't bought me a single device in my life. Their version of events was fiction, but repeating it made them look like involved parents. I ignored all of it. At 22, I transitioned from junior to full automation engineer. The company trusted me with bigger projects, automating onboarding workflows, creating dashboards, optimizing back-end systems. I liked the work because it didn't depend on the moods of others. If something failed, the logs told me why. If something succeeded, it did so consistently. It was honest. By 23, I had built enough credibility to be considered one of the company's strongest automation specialists. Recruiters started messaging me on LinkedIn. One day, I received an email from a major tech firm, one of the biggest automation-driven companies in the country. They wanted to interview me for a full-time engineer position. Jonathan read the email over my shoulder and said, "See, someone finally recognizes what you're worth." Adeline hugged me and said, "You did this." Not them, you. When the offer arrived, salary, benefits, remote flexibility, I accepted without hesitation. It wasn't about the money. It was about stability. Proof that the years of being sidelined at home didn't define me. Around that same time, Weston attempted to message me on social media. He wrote, "Heard the news. Proud of you. You should stop by sometime." Victoria commented on my job announcement with, "We always believed in you." I didn't respond. I didn't even feel tempted. By the end of 23, I was financially secure, building a future on skills I earned myself, and living with the only people who ever showed me what family meant. I could have moved out, but staying made sense. I helped around the house, covered expenses, and kept my routine steady. Weston and Victoria existed like strangers in another life, irrelevant to the one I was creating. And for the first time, I was completely fine with that. I was 24 and settling into my role as an automation engineer when everything shifted again. Late one evening, after a long day debugging workflows, I came home expecting the quiet routine Adeline and Jonathan kept. Instead, I saw an unfamiliar pair of shoes at the door. Expensive ones, the kind Weston liked buying to fit the family image. Inside, Riley sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor like she couldn't hold her head up anymore. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and she looked smaller than I remembered. When she glanced up at me, her eyes were red. "Chris," she whispered, like saying my name alone took effort. I shut the door softly. "What happened?" She shook her head first, like she couldn't sort the story. Adeline came from the kitchen, placed a glass of water in front of her, and said, "She showed up an hour ago. Didn't say much until now." Jonathan added, "She's safe. That's what matters." But even he looked shaken. Riley took a breath and finally said, I couldn't stay there anymore. She didn't need to specify which house. She looked exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. Her shoulders slumped forward, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't the loud, confident girl Weston had built into a showpiece. She looked like someone who had been carrying weight far heavier than anyone realized. I tried, she said. I really did. I sat across from her. Tell me from the start. She nodded slowly, gathering herself. After you left, everything got worse. Dad wanted to make sure I didn't lose focus. He said the car was proof of what he expected from me. He called it an investment he wasn't letting go to waste. I'd suspected as much. Weston never gifted anything without strings attached. Riley continued. Every day was practice, training, film study. If I wanted to see friends, he'd say, "You're not throwing away years of work for childish nonsense." Her voice shook. He said I had no idea how much he spent on me. What about Mom? I asked. Riley let out a tired laugh. She guilt-tripped me constantly. Don't make us look bad. People are watching. Families sacrifice for success. She swallowed hard. She blamed me whenever Dad got angry. She said I was stressing him out. The patterns were familiar, just focused on a different target this time. She rubbed her face with both hands. And the car? It wasn't freedom. It was leverage. Dad said, if you quit basketball, I'll take it back and cut off everything. Don't forget who gave you opportunities. I didn't interrupt. She had never spoken this openly before. Riley's voice lowered. When I turned 22, I told them I wanted to quit. My knee's been getting worse. The doctor said I should rest. But when I said the words, I don't want to play anymore, Dad snapped. How bad? I asked. She shivered. He yelled for almost an hour. Said I was ungrateful, lazy, dramatic. Said I was throwing away the only thing people knew me for. Her eyes filled again. Mom said if I quit, everyone would think they failed as parents. Jonathan clenched his jaw at that. Adeline stepped closer, placing a hand on Riley's shoulder. Riley whispered, I packed a small bag after they went to bed. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay. So I came here. I nodded. You did the right thing. She looked at me like she wasn't sure she believed it. Adeline leaned forward. You're staying with us. No conditions. Riley's face crumpled, relief mixing with exhaustion. Thank you, she breathed. That night, after she fell asleep in the guest room, I sat at the dining table with my laptop. Jonathan pulled up a chair beside me. What's the plan? He asked. I need to know her rights, I said. All of them. I wasn't approaching this emotionally. I approached it like work, clear goal, defined obstacles, structured research. Riley was 22, legally an adult. Her parents couldn't force her home. They couldn't take her car as a punishment if the title and registration were in her name. They couldn't harass her without consequences. I spent hours reading legal guides, harassment laws, protective orders, tenant rights, and what to document if they tried to escalate. I researched how to block parental interference, what counted as emotional abuse in adulthood, and how to prepare evidence if things escalated. Adeline joined us after a while. They'll blame her, she warned. They always blame someone. I know, I said. That's why we have to be ahead of them. Jonathan nodded. Weston won't take this quietly. I looked at the closed door of the guest room. He can try, but I'm not 13 anymore. This was the first time I felt the shift clearly. Growing up, Weston had all the power. Financial, emotional, physical. Now I had independence, a stable job, and the ability to protect someone he'd spent years shaping into a tool. The next morning, Riley found me in the living room going through documents. You don't have to do all this, she said softly. Yes, I told her. I do. She sank into the couch. Dad's going to lose it. Let him, I replied. You're not going back. She stared at me like I'd said something impossible. Then she nodded. Slow, careful, like she was finally allowing herself to believe it. By the end of the week, I had everything prepared. Statements, legal references, police contact lines, and documentation templates. Not because I planned to fight Weston in court, but because I knew he only backed down when he realized he couldn't control the narrative. For the first time in years, I was ready to confront him. Not as the kid he dismissed, but as an adult who had built a life without him. And this time, I wasn't standing alone. Christmas Day felt unnaturally quiet as Riley and I walked toward the house we used to call home. The snow on the lawn was untouched except for a few footprints from neighbors out on morning walks. Riley kept close behind me, hugging her jacket tightly. She wasn't scared of seeing Weston and Victoria. She was scared of being dragged back into the life she'd barely escaped. The house looked like someone took a holiday catalog and tried to recreate every page at once. Lights wrapped around the columns, oversized ornaments hanging from trees that had no business supporting them, and a plastic Santa so large it blocked part of the walkway. Weston never decorated with joy, he decorated to compete. He opened the door before I could knock. "Christopher!" he shouted, loud enough to make sure the neighbors 2 houses down heard him. "Look who's come home for Christmas! My successful son, the engineer." I didn't move toward him. Victoria appeared behind him, wearing a red sweater with sequins that caught every bit of light in the room. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were calculating. "Christopher, dear, you look wonderful." "And Riley," her voice dipped into irritation. "I hope you're done with this little rebellion." Riley said nothing. Her silence said enough. We stepped inside only far enough to get out of the cold. The interior looked even worse than the outside. Garlands wrapped around every staircase rail, candles arranged like props, and a 12-foot Christmas tree that practically blocked the hallway. The whole place felt like a set preparing for an audience Weston cared more about than his actual children. "Let's have a nice holiday moment," Weston said, trying to steer the situation. "No drama. We have neighbors over later." "We're not here to celebrate," I said. "We're here to settle things once and for all." Victoria's smile cracked. "Christopher, please, it's Christmas. Don't embarrass us." Riley stepped forward slightly. "Mom, I'm not coming back. I'm staying with Chris." Victoria stiffened. "Absolutely not. You're confused. You're letting him influence—" "I made my own decision," Riley said, louder this time. Weston's composure snapped instantly. "You think you can just walk out? After everything we invested in you?" His voice rose. "That car, your training, the years of pushing you to succeed, none of that was free. It wasn't help," Riley said. "It was control." Hearing that from her made something collapse in the room. Weston jabbed a finger toward the driveway. "If you're leaving this family, you're not taking the car. I'll repossess it myself." Riley's breath hitched. "It was a gift." "No," Weston barked. "It was an investment, and I'm taking back what's mine." He stormed out before I could respond. Riley grabbed onto my sleeve, eyes wide, terrified of what would come next. I followed Weston outside. Snow crunched under his boots as he marched straight to the car. Neighbors began peeking from windows, drawn by the raised voices. "Step away from the car," I said. Weston snapped. "I paid for every bit of it. She doesn't get to walk away with my property." I pulled out the folder I brought. "The title and registration are in Riley's name. If you take it without her permission, that's vehicle theft. If you touch it or try to disable it, that's criminal damage." Weston froze. "Where did you get this?" I prepared, "Because I know exactly how you operate." Victoria rushed outside. "Christopher, what are you doing? It's Christmas. You are humiliating us." "You humiliate yourselves," I said calmly. "We're just bringing the truth to daylight." Weston slammed his fist on the car roof. "You think paperwork scares me? You think you can turn my own daughter against me?" Riley stepped beside me. "Dad, please stop. I just want peace." Her voice cracked, but she stood her ground. He pointed at her like she was a stranger. "If you leave, don't expect anything from us again. No help, nothing." "You've never helped me," Riley said quietly. That line landed harder than anything else could have. Inside the house, Victoria was pacing in the doorway, whispering frantically, "People are watching. People are watching. Christopher, enough. You're ruining our holiday." I opened the folder fully and handed Weston a set of papers. "Here's what happens next. As soon as the courthouse opens again, I'll file for a no-contact harassment order. Any attempt to intimidate, track, threaten, or interfere with Riley or me becomes legally actionable." Victoria blinked in disbelief. You can't do that." "To your own parents?" "You made it easy," I said. "These statements document years of coercion toward Riley. Notes from doctors you ignored. Riley's written account of emotional abuse. Evidence of your attempt to take the car back. Everything is prepared." Weston's face darkened. "You think you can drag us to court and win?" "I don't need to win," I said. "I just need to set boundaries. And the law is on Riley's side now." Neighbors were openly watching now, some standing on porches, some whispering, some recording on their phones. Weston's greatest fear, public humiliation, wrapped around him like the cold air. He barked, "We're still your parents." I shook my head. "You're people I used to know, that's all." Victoria's eyes filled with frantic panic. "Christopher, please, think about what this looks like." "I am," I said. "For the first time, I'm thinking clearly." Riley touched my arm. Her voice was soft but firm. "Let's go." I opened the passenger door for her. Jonathan rolled down the window slightly from the driver's seat. "All done?" I nodded. "They know everything now." As Riley got in the car, Weston shouted behind us, "You'll regret this! Both of you." But neither of us turned back. We drove away while the lights of that over-decorated house blinked in the mirrors. Loud, bright, desperate. A perfect symbol of people who cared more about image than truth. I didn't lose a family. I walked away from people who never were one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.